score, trying to come in alone. Shoot! Score! He had it good! He had it good, baby! He wins it for the Lightning! 5-4 in overtime!
Taylor the shot, redirected, score! Game 7, Montana St. Louis! We are going back to Tampa Bay! Cavalier spinning. Cavalier looking. Trying to drop it off. Brings it in himself. Left it in the middle. Shot.
What's going on, guys? Phil and Jake are here for another episode of Thunderstruck. Jake, how's it going, buddy?
It's going pretty good. How about yourself, Phil?
Good, man. I'm a little under the weather, but we'll get this done. The first game that we got to kind of talk about is the Bolts played the Jets. I know it was a couple weeks back, guys, but they played the Jets, and we unfortunately lost this one in a way of overtime. What do you think about this game, Jake? Like, what do you think went wrong?
It's tough to say. I think the main thing about this game was the Lightning were not able to close things out at the end of the period. Because if you watch the game, the Lightning were able to score. They'd go up in the period. They'd lead by 1 goal. And then Winnipeg, I believe they scored 3 goals in 3 different periods in the final minutes. So that was a big problem for the Lightning. The Jets constantly kept coming back and tying the game, and then they were able to take it in overtime and win it. So my big thing was them not being able to close it out.
Yeah, and that we kind of talked about this in our last show, where we talked about how well the Jets play their offense, and it's really 2 offensive powerhouses going on against each other. If you look at it, it's kind of the same type of lineups. They have a decent bottom 6, as do we. And their top players are amazing players. You got Blake Wheeler there and Mark Scheifele, and I believe they both got on the score sheet in this game. So it's pretty interesting when you have those type of teams match up against each other to see how they kind of pan out.
Yeah, and I think an important thing to note here is too, we did lose in overtime. And you never want to lose, but losing in overtime is always better. So when you get 2 top teams like this, you're going to have these close games. So I think it's good that the Lightning, this wasn't a 5-1 victory for the Jets. This was a 5-4 overtime victory. So it was a close game, and the Lightning definitely showed they're able to keep up with the Jets. And in a 7-game series, if it were to come to that in the finals, the Lightning could easily keep up with this team and make it really interesting.
Yeah, and that's the thing that you got to look at too. Like we've talked about before. It's not always how you play in the regular season, but how you play when it really counts in the playoffs. So the next game that we played against, it was the Canucks. And wow, was this game fun to watch, guys. Like you mentioned in our post-game, Jake, it's like an old-time hockey game. We're taking a flashback to the 1980s, and we got this win in 5-2 in regulation.
Yeah, definitely like an old-time hockey game, that's for sure. Martel had that hit. I think it was in the early second period that the Canucks just took objection to and were not happy about it and did not want to let that go, and things just kind of spiraled out of control from there on out. But this is one of my favorite games for the Lightning out of this entire road trip, and the reason that is because it was a very physical game, and a lot of criticism for the Lightning has come from that they can't keep up with teams that are physical. A big thing last year when the Lightning lost to the Capitals in the Eastern Conference Finals was people said the Capitals just were more physical than them and the Lightning couldn't keep up with it. But this game showed right here, even though it is Vancouver who has been having the best season, they're not terrible, but they played a hard physical game and they won. And they won 5-2 in a big way. So this was a good sign to me for this team.
Right. And not only that, too, like you mentioned, is that we do have those physical players. We have players like Paquette and Ernie and stuff like that. So, it's something to really keep an eye on. So not only that we can put up points, but also we can lead in his department, because I think Paquette is like one of the top hit leaders in the league right now. And he has been all season. So it's fun to watch him, and he's also putting up numbers as well. It's kind of what we talked about before. Paquette is kind of like an underrated guy. I mean, I know you weren't too happy at the beginning of the season with the signing, but how do you think about him now, Jake?
I mean, don't get me wrong. I do like Paquette a lot. He brings a physicality element to this team that is needed. I don't want to sit here and say that it was a terrible signing. It obviously wasn't. He's still not my favorite player. I think there's other bottom six guys that we have that could easily step up and replace him. But for the time being, he's obviously been a huge help, and he's been playing pretty well. He's been scoring goals too. So, I hope he keeps it up and stays consistent with this.
Yeah. I believe I read something where he was doing some practice before, and they were saying that he needs to shoot more. It's kind of an attest to the way that he plays and how much he has elevated his game as of late. And speaking of elevating games, guys, we played one of the best teams in the league when it went over to the next game against the Calgary Flames. It wasn't a pretty game, but this would be Stamkos' 700th in his NHL career, and luckily for him, guys, we pulled out that win.
Yeah, and real quick, Phil, the Cedric Paquette is 4th in the league with hits with 130. William Carter currently leads the league with 204, so Paquette definitely very up there with his hits. But yeah, this was a fun game to watch. This was a very offensive game. Stamkos, who has played unbelievable in the month of December, had a good game. And let's talk about Louis Domingue, though. Louis Domingue was fantastic in this game, especially in the overtime and shootout periods.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. You have to rely on your backup sometimes, and because we watched Vazzy complain before and how many times he got the start, and it's tiring. You can't just be only a one goalie team. And luckily, when Vazzy went down with injury, I mean, it's not a good thing that he went down with injury, but the way that Domingue played and the way that he played in this game, it's kind of the same deal here.
For sure. And Domingue was playing, top 10 teams. I mean, Calgary is by far one of the better teams in the NHL. They're currently 5th with 50 points. And to see him, make these miraculous stops on these top tier players is really good to see for Lightning fans, because that it gives you a peace of mind that if Vasi was to get hurt or if he's to get a little bit tired, you wouldn't be concerned when Domingue has to come into the net. This team is going to be at the same level playing, whether it's Vasi or Domingue in net.
Right, and that's a great thing to see, like I mentioned earlier. The following game was the Oilers game, and this is a game that I enjoyed watching on TV, especially with the play of Kucherov getting those 5 points in that game, and Stamkos also getting 2 goals. So our superstars really shined in this one.
Yeah, Nikita Kucherov, he's been on fire lately as well, as he now leads the league in points with 63. So he's been very fun to watch. He was great in that game, and I think this game was probably one of the best that the Lightning played. Winning the game 6-3. Defense was definitely one of the best it's been in the month of December, or recently anyway. And so it was really nice to see the offense going and the defense playing pretty well. Yeah,
and that's the thing too. You mentioned about the defense. We've had a lot of goals against recently. I know that we've faced a lot of shots, and that's my opinion on why we have so many goals against. Because our defense, they're doing well as far as offense, but they're so far up in the play, and sometimes that leads to turnovers on their bad passes, and that's what you got to limit.
Right, 4 of the last 6 games for the Lightning have been 4 or more goals against, and that's not what you want to see. And to your point of defenders playing up on the play, we saw last night against Montreal, Hedman was constantly up on the play, which is not a bad thing at all, because he created, a couple of nice scoring chances there. But it just seems that we give up too many odd man rushes every once in a while, and we're letting teams get these, as the Lightning would call it, grade A chances, and they're capitalizing on it. Just like Montreal did last night.
Yeah, and that's the thing I got to mention too. Played by Adam Ernie in the Montreal game. We'll go back to the Flyers game in a second here. But the play by Adam Ernie in last game, that kid is something else. He's a bottom six guy, but that's what we need. We need bottom six people to kind of step in and play up in the score sheet.
Yeah, Adam Ernie was huge for us last night. When we needed him most, he stepped up big time. And we have mentioned this before, but the depth is what's really made this team special in having the ability to score no matter who's on the ice at any time is such a big help for this team, and it makes it so hard for our opponents to defend the Lightning because they constantly have to be out there and on their game 24/7. So, it's been a big part of the Lightning's success.
Yeah. So I mentioned that we're going to go back to the Flyers game, and here it is, guys. This game really upset me. We were leading going into the third period by a few goals, and we literally took a dive, and we luckily won this game, but it was not pretty at all.
No, not at all. The Flyers are one of the worst teams in the NHL right now. They're in 28th. They only have, 15 wins on the season. The thing I considered, though, after this game was, for whatever reason, the Lightning have a very difficult time with the Flyers. We've seen this multiple times throughout the last couple of years, in fact. Even the last game before this, that when the Lightning played the Flyers, it was nearly identical, where the Flyers came back and made the game interesting. So, I don't know why this is, but this is something that the Lightning will need to make sure that they correct, because come playoff time, if teams are able to come back, it's going to be a little bit different story, because they may not let the Lightning end up winning the game in overtime.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting too, like you mentioned about the Flyers. The Lightning won against the Flyers earlier in the season with a total of 6-5. So, what do you think it is, Jake, this year about us struggling against top teams? I mean, it's not only this year either. If you remember a couple years back, we didn't go to the playoffs because we lost against the Arizona Coyotes.
Yeah, it's hard to put my finger on, honestly, because we're winning games. We're still dominating the NHL, but it just seems like we're making things more difficult on our goaltenders than it has to be. If I had to guess, to me, we're letting teams take too many shots. And one way you can prevent that, and something I've noticed with the Lightning this year, if you look at the penalty kill, last year the Lightning did not have a very good penalty kill, and this year they're 8th in the league right now, I believe. And what they're doing differently is they're quickly jumping on players and forcing them to pass the puck and move it around, trying to look for that open shot. And that forces teams to sometimes make bad passes or make quick, ill-advised shots that end up missing the net. So I think the Lightning need to start doing that 5-on-5 as well.
No, and I agree with you. Like you said earlier, our power play is almost automatic. If you look at the power play, we're leading the league in that category. And it's something that really to pay attention to when we preview the games. One of the games we'll preview against the Ducks, and we'll get into that. And we have actually a special guest. We'll introduce him a little bit later. But, that's something that you got to pay a test to when you talk about the Lightning, is how well they've been playing on the power play.
For sure, the power play has been fantastic, and I love Nikita Kucherov and Steven Stamkos, the chemistry they've had. And Stamkos, who's turned into an assist machine this season, especially, still scoring goals as well. But if you watch him on the power play, every time he gets the puck, he's always looking across the ice to see if Steven Stamkos is open, and he'll make that pass 9 times out of 10, which has led to many of goals. So power play has been fantastic, and I don't see this stopping anytime soon.
Yeah, like you mentioned, Kucherov has really been the setup guy for Stamkos there, and it's kind of nice to see that as well. The chemistry between the two guys, even though they don't play on the same line, it's nice to see when they're reunited again on the power play, as they can really feed off each other. And Jake, you had an article recently about the best team in franchise history. You think that this team is the best team in the franchise history?
Absolutely. And, talent-wise and, how we're doing is, you look at it, it's about the same as what we were doing last year. I mean, the record is, I think we're a couple wins ahead of where we were last year. But the big difference with this team is people will say the feel is different. The locker room is just different. And the two things that stand out to me with this team is the way they're able to adjust mid-game and come back and win games where they're having mistakes and things aren't going their way. And they're also beating teams right now that are in the top 10. I mentioned in the article that the Lightning have beaten, I think it was 6 out of the 8 teams they had played in the top 10 at the time. And they're continuing to do that. They're playing good teams and they're playing good, which is why this season feels so different.
Right. And, that's the thing, too. If you look at the way that the 04 team played and the way that our currents are playing, I think that this team, like you mentioned, is a way better team. You look at the stats categories and everything else, and it shows on paper as well.
Right, and the team has been able to build up chemistry over last year. Like I mentioned, the roster is basically identical with a couple of bottom 6 guys that were changed out, and depth scoring has just been good, like we said. So everything is clicking for the Lightning, and they have not had, thankfully, too many major injuries that have kept people out for a long time. And that's another thing, too. Even with the injuries that the Lightning have had, the pace for the Lightning that they're playing at has not slowed down, even when those guys are out. I mean, we've had Vasi out, Hedman, Palat, JT Miller is now out for a little bit. So this team just doesn't show any signs of slowing down. Their weakest point is defense, and even the defense has got big-time talent that can easily step up and change things next month.
Right. Okay, and another thing I got to point out, too, the lineups have been changing in the defense. People are swapping in and out, and Slater Cuckoo was kind of the left odd man out, and I knew that he was going to eventually get sent down, and that's eventually what did happen. Slater Cuckoo is now on a conditioning stint with Syracuse.
Yep, this was definitely the right move for the Lightning to send him down and get him some playing time, because there's only so much you can learn from the press box. I think being in the press box and watching a team like this is very important, but at some point you're going to want the guy to play too. So I'm glad he is down in the AHL getting his playing time. But a big question I know for a lot of Lightning fans right now is, what are we going to do with Cuckoo for next year? A lot of people think we should trade him. But me personally, though, I think Cuckoo would want to stay here. I think he wants to play for the Lightning. And if you look at our defense and who's going up in contract and who's getting older, there's 3 defensemen, them being Strawman, Coburn, and Girardi are the 3 guys that you could see the Lightning possibly losing next year. Now, we could keep some of them, of course. But Cuckoo is one of those guys where he could come up and replace these defenders. So I think for Cuckoo, I think he should stay here. I think we should keep him, or try to keep him anyway, and look to get him ready for next year, because I think next year is going to be a lot different than this year.
Yeah, and like you can say, of course Cuckoo wants to play here. I mean, we're winning. He wants to win a Stanley Cup. Who doesn't want to win that Stanley Cup? And if we keep playing the way we are, we keep leading in goals for, it's going to happen. We're going to win that Stanley Cup. And it's a great time to be a Lightning fan right now.
Absolutely, no question about it. And every Lightning fan is very excited about this season. So, we still got about halfway to go before we get to the playoffs, but I can't wait for the rest of this season for sure.
Yeah, and another thing that happened over the last couple of weeks is that Gabriel Fortier signed an ELC, and that's he's a good prospect, and you got to kind of look into your future and say, hey, we don't only got to think about winning now, but we got to think about being a long-time successful team. And with the signing of Gabriel Fortier, I think we can actually do that. Jake, going also into the future a little bit here, it's only at the end of the month. Who do you think is going to make the All-Star game for us?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I recently looked into this and was messing around with it myself. The Atlantic has so much talent, and it's going to be really hard to get everybody in there because of all the talent here. You mean, you look at Toronto and Tampa alone. I mean, they've got 10 guys between the two of them that could be in the All-Star game. So for me personally, though, to answer your question, I think it's going to be Kucherov for sure. And then I think it's a question of who goes between Point and Stamkos. Point has had an amazing year. He's played very balanced. He has 20-plus goals and assists as he sits around 40, 50 points, I think it is. And, I think Stamkos unfortunately gets left out. However, Stamkos has had a great month of December where he's been on fire. So, if Stamkos can keep this up, maybe he gets in there instead of Point. But those are the three guys that I look at for who's going to be on the All-Star team for us.
Absolutely. And, the unfortunate thing is that Vazzy didn't play most of the season. He was out with injury. So I think that if he would have stayed in the lineup and he would have remained healthy, I think that we could have maybe tested him too. But unfortunately, he was not. And I agree with you completely. When I think about the All-Star game, it's either going to be going to be for sure Nikita Kucherov. I mean, the month of December, he was on fire, and if it maintains, it's only going to continue there. And not only that, but I think that, like you said, it's going to be kind of you make a case for either Braden Point or Steven Stamkos there, and they're both my favorite players, so I'm not going to choose them. I can't.
Yeah, it would definitely be tough. I think it's going to depend on, who keeps this up in these last couple of days before the All-Star selections are made. So that's the big thing for me. If Stamkos can keep up the way he's playing, he's more than likely going because he is a bigger name than Braden Point is. So we'll see what happens, though, in this next month.
Yeah, as you mentioned, though, Braden Point is not as big a name as Stamkos. However, I kind of think that he's one of the most underrated players in the league.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. No doubt about it that he is making a name for himself. And, I think one of the reasons that he is so underrated, so to speak, is because, he's in the shadow of guys like Nikita Kucherov, Victor Hedman, Ryan McDonough, Steven Stamkos. I mean, the list goes on and on. So there's so many talented players in the Lightning that a lot of people don't take notice of Braden Point. But he's definitely still playing well, and if he keeps this up, he'll make a name for himself very soon.
Yeah, and he was last year top 10 in voting for the Selke, which means that not only could he play offense, but he can play defense very well as well. And if you remember last year, speaking of defense, he went to the All-Star game for a defenseman. The Lightning were lucky enough to send, 4 or 5 guys there last year?
Yeah, four players made it for us.
Yeah, 4 players. You got Vazzy, Hetty, who unfortunately could not make it, and then you got Stamkos, Kucherov, and Braden Point there. So it's great to see that as well. And like I said, talking about future, I mean, this kid's young. He's only had his, I believe this is his third year, correct? His third year in the NHL?
Yes, I believe so, because his contract is about to come up.
Yeah, so it's great to see how our young players are performing. I mean, even Nikita Kucherov and Steven Stamkos aren't that old. I mean, they're not even in their 30s yet. So it's great to see that as well. And, we kind of preview the upcoming games here. If you look at the schedule, the next game that's coming up is going to be against the Ducks. As I mentioned before, we're going to have a special guest on the show, so we'll get into that a little bit later. And then on the 3rd, we play against the Kings. Now, the Kings have been struggling as of late, and it's largely due to injuries to Jonathan Quick and players like that, and players like Ilya Kovalchuk not performing.
Right, yeah, the Kings have not had a good season. They're currently the worst team in the league with 33 points, only 15 wins on the season. So they've not been having a good season. But, as we mentioned before, like with the Flyers, the Lightning, for whatever reason, sometimes struggle with these teams. So they definitely still need to be playing at the top of their game and going at full speed, so to speak. I think the big question is, though, we talked about this a little bit, Phil, is where is Domingue going to play in these upcoming games? We have Anaheim, like we mentioned, so it's going to be interesting to see who who plays between Domingue and Vasi.
Yeah, it will be. I think that Domingue might play against the Kings based on how they've been struggling. I thought originally that it could be against the Ducks, but now that Gibson is back for the Ducks, I don't think it will be. So I kind of could see him playing against the Kings. And then the following game there, you're going against the San Jose Sharks. Now, San Jose Sharks are a pretty decent team as well. So obviously, speaking of goaltenders, I could see Vasi starting there. So that it kind of would make sense if he started against the Kings, right?
Right. It would give Vasi the most rest and get ready for the Sharks, who are a top 10 team. It's going to be a tough one for sure.
Yeah, and then you kind of do get a rest there. I mean, you play the Ducks on Monday, and then you don't play the Kings again until Thursday. So if Vasi had almost a whole week off until that Saturday against the Sharks, I think it would be really good for him. He is playing well, but at the same time, you don't really know how healthy he is either. He's coming off a recent injury, so the rest would be good for him anyways. And then, going towards the Sharks, I think that we should win this game as well. The Sharks do have, like you mentioned before, Jake, they do have an all-star team. You got Pavelski there, you got Thornton, you got Erik Karlsson, Brent Burns, and the list goes on and on there. So it's going to be a good game to watch, but I think we'll come out this win as well.
Yeah, a big defensive game in this one, with the Lightning having Hedman and McDonough, and then the Sharks having Burns and Karlsson. So, 4 guys right there that could be the number one defenseman on almost any other team. So it should be a fun, hopefully a defensive game. I don't think Lightning fans would be too upset to see that, as with the recent high offensive games that we've had.
Yeah. And then, the last game I want to kind of talk about is the Blue Jackets. The Lightning come back home after the Western trip, and they played the Blue Jackets. Now, the Blue Jackets, they've been kind of off and on most of the season, but they do have weapons like Werenski and Seth Jones, who play up into the play just like our Bolts defensemen, and it's going to be a great game down there as well.
Yeah, that should be another offensive game that we've seen the Lightning play. These are two teams that know how to score, and generally when they play each other do score field goals against each other. So that should be another fun one to watch, though. I think when you look on paper for any of these games, the Lightning are the favorite here. I think it's a matter of how much do they execute, though, and do they let teams climb back into things when it gets down to game time.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, Jake, our team has had a 15-point streak going right now, and I don't see it going down anytime soon.
No, I don't. I'm kind of excited, though. The record for point streak was set by the 04 team. It was 18 points, so the Lightning are creeping up on that very slowly here, and with these next couple of games generally being quote-unquote easier games, the Lightning could definitely break that record, and it would be very exciting.
Yeah, I wouldn't call them easier. I would maybe call them winnable. But, like you mentioned before, Jake, it's the easier teams that we've kind of been struggling against. So it's going to be an interesting trip coming out west here. And luckily for me, I'm going to the game tomorrow. Might not sound the greatest, but I'll be cheering as loud as I possibly can for the Bulls. I've got some glass seats to go to, and I'm going to enjoy it. So now we got a special guest coming on, and hope you guys enjoy that interview here. We have a special guest on here today, Forever Mighty. They have a post-game show type deal with the Ducks, and one of my good buddies, Eddie Jones, is here. What's going on, Eddie?
Not much. Just getting over a brutal loss to the world beater Arizona Coyotes last night, 5-4 in overtime. So wasn't a great game yesterday. So still trying to get over it.
Yeah, Aiden Hill's kind of. Do you think he's kind of like the next superstar of the goalies, or do you think he's just had a pretty good game?
I don't know if he's the next superstar. I haven't seen too much of him. I think he's a good young goaltender, but before this season, there wasn't a lot of hype around him. So I think he still needs a bit more of a resume before I can put him in front of some of the top goalie prospects.
I was kind of nervous for you guys seeing that other game when Gibson went down, but he played last night, huh?
Yeah, I was more nervous. Obviously, when he went out, they said it was questionable for him to return, which is generally a good sign, meaning maybe they held him out for precautionary reasons. But I was more nervous the next morning when he wasn't practicing. That was the big thing. They brought up Kevin Boyle, so I thought he was going to be out for a long time. And then before yesterday's game, they were practicing with 3 goalies, and then obviously Kevin Boyle got sent down, and he was good to go. But that's what they would need at this point, another injury, and this time to, arguably their best player, and the only reason they are where they are. If John Gibson goes out, there's no way this losing streak that they're on stops anytime soon.
You have to wonder, too, if Gibson is 100% right now. Coming back from an injury, not all goalies are able to go at full swing right away. So, I'm curious to know if he is 100% healthy or if he's still 90% at this point.
Yeah, you could argue that. If you look at last night's game, there were a couple plays where he didn't look necessarily comfortable going cross-crease. There were a lot of cross-crease goals in that one, and something that doesn't necessarily happen to John Gibson a lot is in the overtime, Clayton Keller froze him, completely froze him. He didn't even move. Great move by Keller, but also maybe because John Gibson did apparently hurt his back in the game against the Sharks, so maybe that's a little bit on him just not being able to fully move at 100%. I don't know. John Gibson is a guy who would generally play no matter what. I feel like at this point, though, the Ducks, the training staff and the coaches and the trainers and everything wouldn't let him play unless he was 100%. So if he's not 100, I think he's pretty close to it at this point.
That's another thing that I wanted to talk about, too. Gibson has been, like you said earlier, been their best player as of late, and especially actually throughout the whole season. So do you think that he might get that call for the upcoming All-Star game?
I think he has to. If every team sends one guy, and if you look at the Ducks right now, you can argue maybe a couple other guys, but I think John Gibson's really the guy you would go with right now. I think everybody would go with. He's been the Ducks' best player all year. He is up in the consideration, I would assume, and a lot of people have given him some recognition for the Vezina so far this year at the midway point. So I think he would be the automatic in for the Ducks. The only other guys you could consider at this point are maybe Ryan Getzlaf because he's putting up close to a point per game, but there's a lot of good forwards in the Pacific Division that he would have to beat out. And then Andre Kashin maybe gets in that vote a little bit too because he's got 18 points in 22 games. But again, you look at some of the forwards the Flames have, even in the Oilers with McDavid getting in as captain, and across the board with San Jose and a lot of the other teams, and Elias Pettersson as well. There's just too many good young forwards. I think the likely option for the Ducks is that John Gibson gets in.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. You got to have some goalies in there, and Gibson's definitely one of the best goalies in that division. There's so many good forwards that I just don't see anybody else getting in.
Yeah. And especially it being at San Jose. You're always going to have more players from this team that's hosting it anyways. So I would agree with that as well.
Yeah, I think so. Again, you look at Calgary, for sure they're going to send a forward. Maybe Giordano makes it, but they're not going to be sending a goaltender. And even if you just look at the goaltenders in the Pacific Division right now, it's not that great. Martin Jones has been one of the worst goaltenders in the league. Mikko Koskinen and Cam Talbot have split time. Jonathan Quick's been injured at times. Antti Ranta has been out for Arizona. Vancouver has got mixed goaltending. So really the only team that's had consistent goaltending and had a consistently good goaltender is the Ducks. So it's an easy spot for him to get one of those positions. I don't know who's going to get the other goaltending slot in the Pacific because there really hasn't been anybody that's been that good.
Yeah, the only thing that I could think of is Fleury for the Golden Knights.
Yeah. They'll need to send somebody, so.
Right, and that would be my pick too for the Golden Knights.
How do you think that we'll fare against you guys on Monday?
Well, you guys have won every game except one in December so far. Goals against average on the season. Our goals per game, on the season above 4, and this month it's almost 5. I think it'll be a pretty easy game for the Lightning, unfortunately. John Gibson's probably going to get the start, but when you've got guys as hot as Nikita Kucherov are right now, and you look at the Ducks allowing 5 goals against one of the worst offensive teams in the league in the Arizona Coyotes, they also can't score any goals. The 4 losses prior to this one, they had scored 4 goals in those 4 games. So it could get messy. One of the guys in our post-game show today predicted a 2-0 Ducks win. I think that would be ridiculous. John Gibson would probably have to make 50 or 60 saves to make that come true.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I think it's going to be a blowout Tampa Bay Lightning win. I really can't see the Ducks putting up too much of a fight.
Yeah,
That's the thing too. You look at the offensive firepower that the Bolts have, and we're lucky to have. It's going to be a high-scoring game, no matter what.
Yeah, on paper, this is definitely a game for the Lightning to win. But as we've seen for the Lightning in the past couple of games, they've continuously made things a little more difficult on themselves as the defense has not been playing to the level that they can be. So it'll be interesting to see if they're going to let the Ducks, get back into this game if they do end up jumping on a lead early in the period. So it'll be interesting to see their. The Ducks did beat the Lightning earlier in the season too, so I wouldn't put it past them in making this a close game. I think it all depends on how the defense plays tonight and whether they can shut things down.
Yeah, that's the thing too. You had Ryan Miller in the last game against the Bolts, and Ryan Miller played out of his mind in that game. So
I would think no matter what, even if Miller's available, they'd probably go with Gibby. But there's a chance that if Miller had been available, they might have gone with him just because of that, because we've seen Randy Carlyle in the past. He likes to go on past records versus teams or how guys have done in recent times, so that could have been done. I think either way, if you go with John Gibson or Ryan Miller, you're going to get a pretty decent start. But I just think, you look at the threat that the multiple threats, I guess you could say, that the Lightning can throw over the boards in the season that Braden Point's having. Even Steven Stamkos is having an underrated season compared to some of the guys on his team. And then, of course, the month of December that Nikita Kucherov had to propel him into the league lead in scoring. I mean, right now, even the power play, which I think you guys have, the league leading power play?
Yep.
So, the Ducks take a lot of indisciplined penalties. You put the Lightning on the power play too many times, they're going to score. So, I mean, I hope the Ducks can win. And if they do win, John Gibson's going to have to stand on his head. I think that's the only way they win this game. The Ducks would have to squeak out like a 2-1, 3-2 win where John Gibson makes 40-plus saves.
yeah, and it's not going to be easy. I mean, yes, Gibson is one of the best goaltenders in the Pacific Division, arguably, like you said earlier, in the league. But it's not going to be easy for anybody to withstand that kind of shots against.
So I think you're right. John Gibson early on in the season faced a ton of shots. He was facing over 40, sometimes 50 shots a game. I think he's faced at 5-on-5 the most shots against, if I double check right now. So he's behind a couple of guys, but he's in the top 5 in shots against at 5-on-5. And then if you threw in the power play, the way the Ducks take penalties, that's probably up there higher. And you look at the guys who are above him, it's Craig Anderson on a very bad Ottawa team and Marc-Andre Fleury on a team in Vegas who hasn't been that good until as of late. So he's used to facing a lot of shots, but the difference, I think, in this sense is if you put up a lot of shots, say, against Arizona, it's not the same as if you allow a lot of shots against a team like Tampa Bay, where a lot of those shots are generally high-danger chances, and they're coming from some of the most lethal goal scorers in the NHL.
Yeah, very, very true. A lot of people have been even saying the Lightning need to shoot more, but when they do shoot, their shots are usually shots that they're thinking they can score 100% on. But going back to the special teams real quick, I've been saying a lot of the pre-games that I've done for these teams that struggle on special teams that they've got to win these 5-on-5 battles, because like you mentioned, the Lightning have the best power play in the NHL right now. So when you give them that many chances, they're going to score. So I think for the Ducks to win this game, they got to win this 5-on-5, which is even tough to do within itself.
No, for sure. And I think you're right with that. I mean, if you look at 5-on-5 and just goaltender stats, John Gibson is one of the best 5-on-5 goaltenders in the league. His save percentage 5-on-5 is .937. His goals against average is .201. So he's a great 5-on-5 goaltender. He makes a lot of saves. He has the most high danger shots against 5-on-5, yet he's still putting up those numbers. So I think for him and for the Ducks, that's what they need to do, is stay out of the box. Unfortunately, they haven't been able to do that, and even when they get their own power play opportunities, they really haven't been able to convert on it. So the way I think this game gets won for the Ducks is John Gibson obviously has to stand on his head 5-on-5. The Ducks would have to stay out of the penalty box, and if they do get opportunities, because not that the Lightning penalty kill is bad, but it's not top 10 in the league. It's not their strong suit. The Ducks would have to take advantage of that and put some pucks in the back of the net if they were to hope to win this game.
Yeah, and like I said, the Lightning have kind of dropped down the games that we should have won. I mean, we should have won easily against Philly, and we should have won against the Montreal Canadiens, and we did. But at the same time, it was only because of the play of Adam Ernie that we won that game. And that's the thing too. You got to look at our bottom six, and our bottom six is kind of underrated if you look at it.
A big thing about this team, though, is that despite them making games more difficult for themselves, is that they quickly respond and can make mid-game adjustments. That's something they couldn't do last year, and what they're doing a lot this year. They are not rattled when they go down early or when they go down big. We saw in the Montreal game, they went down 2-0 very quickly and then came right back and took the lead 3-2. So that's one thing that I really like about this team, and is why I don't get concerned much when these teams do have these problems, because they have been able to adjust in game, which is a big part of the reason why we're doing so good in December.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, the Lightning are just, I guess, the model when you look at depth across the entire lineup. They've got, I think, 6 guys right now who have over 25 points. And you look at the Ducks, they've only got 1, and that's Ryan Getzlaf. And the only other guy who gets close is Adam Henrique with 22. So they've just got a lot of guys who can put the puck in the back of the net. And yeah, I use 25 as a benchmark, but then you look at some of these guys. I mean, Kucherov has 63, Point has 50, Stamkos 43, and it's just ridiculous to see some of these point totals that these guys are putting up. And I think when you go down early and you can rely on not just one guy or one line, you've got maybe 3 lines you can throw over the boards to put up these chances and put goals and pucks in the back of the net. And I mean, one team that's been talked about, or a couple teams have been talked about a lot this year, the Boston Bruins with that top line and arguably being the best line in hockey, and then the Colorado Avalanche with Mika Rantanen and Nathan McKinnon and Gabriel Landeskog. For them, they've got that line, and they don't have the scoring depth after it. For the Lightning, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, they play Stamkos and Kucherov on separate lines, and then they've got guys like Tyler Johnson and other guys deeper in their lineup. Cirelli has come up and played well this year. You've got all these guys in your top 9 that you could throw over the boards, and they're generally a good matchup against the other team's pairings.
Yeah, 100% right. They did break up Stamkos and Kucherov. They're on separate lines. The only time they play together is usually on the power play, where they'll put both of them on either side to just give that big threat during the man advantage. But as we mentioned, just so many guys that can come out and score for the Bolts.
Eddie, I want to thank you so much for having you on here. I want everybody to have a second and check out Forever Mighty as well. They have a great show. I listen to it every night, and thank you so much, buddy.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime, guys.